The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brudzinski. This is the episode for March 22, 2017. On my right, the editor of the Record Journal, Ralph Tomaselli. Ralph, a little bit of a different show today. We're going to get into a topic that has been in the headlines. It's quite controversial. We got some detail. It affects us on a local, state, and national level. And to help us get into this topic, we have two special guests in the studio. They are immigration rights activists with an organization called Connecticut Students for a Dream. In the studio, we have Renato Muguerza Calle and Eric Cruz Lopez. Guys, thanks for coming on the show and helping us work through this issue of immigration rights, deportation, sanctuary cities, ICE enforcement, all that kind of stuff. Before we ask you some questions about yourselves and your organization, I wanted to set the table a little bit with some context, to read from a national article that sort of sets the stage for what you guys are doing and what you're up against. So this comes from the New York Times. It goes back to February 21. Dateline, Washington. The Department of Homeland Security on Tuesday released a set of documents translating President Trump's executive orders on immigration and border security into policy, bringing a major shift in the way the agency enforces the nation's immigration laws. Skipping a bit in the article, the policy calls for an expansion of expedited removals, allowing Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents to deport more people immediately. Under the Obama administration, expedited removal was used only within 100 miles of the border for people who had been in the country no more than 14 days. Now, it will include those who have been in the country for up to 2 years and located anywhere in the nation. The directives would also instruct Immigration and Custom Enforcement, as well as Customs and Border Protection, the parent agency of Border Patrol, to begin reviving a program that recruits local police officers and sheriff's deputies to help with deportation, effectively making them de facto immigration agents. Renato and Eric, that's the general context. We've got some more news to read. But first I wanted to go to you guys, and maybe Eric, you first. If you could describe for me the community you represent, and maybe with individual facts and circumstances, no names necessarily, but we want to get a feel for the issue.
Yeah, of course. So I think part of it is talking about my community. Part of it is talking about myself, because I am undocumented, right? So the work that I do, all of these things that are happening, right? It's not like just a community that's over there, right? But it hits very close to home, right? It affects me, affects my parents, it affects my family, and really a lot of my community, right? So I came to this country when I was 7 years old. My dad had left to come to this country and work when I was about 3 or 4. And we were in Mexico, right? I grew up with my mom and my brother, and we were just kind of making a day-to-day with some of the money that my dad sent home. And then eventually we decided, like 3 years later, right, that it really wasn't working out, right? It really wasn't working out for me, for my mom, for my brother, to have my dad so far away.
So what did you do? What was your next step?
The next step was to come here, right, which is a really big step, and it's also a very hard step to take, for a lot of families, right? To just kind of leave everything you know, leave all your family, leave all your extended family, leave everything you know, the food, the culture, the people, the language, right? Is very hard. But we made that decision and we left, right? We got to the border and then we started walking.
Yeah, let me slow you down. When you made the decision to leave, your family made the decision to leave, did you have the same command of English that you have now?
No, none of us spoke English when we left, right? Not my dad when he left when I was 3 or 4. Not me, my mom, or my brother when we left.
Okay.
Right? We only spoke Spanish.
So I need to go through these steps slowly. Just
Of course,
bear with me if you can. So you get to the border on the Mexican side.
Mhm.
Take it from there. What happens?
Yeah, from there, we're at a couple safe houses. And then one day in the middle of the night, it's like, wake up, it's your time, you're going to go. So they drive us off in the middle of the desert, they drop us off, and we start walking. I'm 7.
In Texas, in Arizona, in California?
I'm not exactly sure where.
Okay.
I was 7, right? I don't remember. And oddly enough, I haven't asked my parents for the exact detail of the exact place that we crossed. But everything else is crystal clear because I was there, right? So it's cold. It's really cold. I have a winter jacket on. I'm carrying a whole gallon of water. I'm 7. My brother's 10. And I'm with my mom and my cousin.
I want to back up again, and again, bear with me. What was the circumstances in Mexico that drove you to this?
Yeah.
What was happening there?
So we were really poor. I lived in a sheet metal house growing up in Mexico. And there's a few other circumstances that necessitated our leaving that I'd rather actually not talk about, right? Very personal things. But one of the big reasons was we were poor, right? We struggled financially in a lot of different ways.
Renato, I want to turn to you before we get back to Eric. And Eric, we're going to pick you up in the desert. When we left this conversation, you're in the middle of the desert. Renato, is this sounding like a common experience based on the work you do?
So when we hear from folks who cross the border, that is a common experience for those that were old enough to remember when they crossed. But us in Connecticut not being a border state, we also deal with many immigrants with stories of overstaying visas. Many people that are here, especially in Connecticut, didn't actually cross the border. Many people came with a tourist visa, a student visa, and had to make the choice to overstay. I myself was born in Lima, Peru. It was much more of a urban setting than Eric's story, and we also came on a plane. And my branch of the family, my mom and myself, through some good circumstance, were able to get our documentation. But I have family members who have overstayed visas out of necessity.
And what were the circumstances in your family in Peru that made you come to this decision?
So my mom was a single mother. She had very few options for herself, and the education system and the opportunity that she saw for herself was not what she wanted to give her son, to give to me. And she knew that because she was a single mother and she was, young and still had motivation and ability to sort of take that brave step of going into a new nation and, trying to learn a new language and build yourself a new career and a new life, she knew that she had to do everything she could.
What is she doing now?
Now she's actually an accountant. She put herself through college here, and she is an accountant at for a business in Meriden.
Ralph?
Well, no, just an observation that I find it interesting that if I don't know a whole lot about why my relatives left Italy to come here, but what I do know is they were poor and they were looking for opportunity. So it just strikes me that, the reason immigrants came 100 years ago and the reason immigrants came 20 years ago, in a lot of cases, hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, this show isn't about us, but there's a lot of stories,
right.
Among us. My grandparents on both sides escaped Russia in the middle of pogroms, which were these riots and
right.
civil unrest,
right.
and their houses were burned.
Right.
And it was a different time, a different era. but their experience was different, but there were common threads. They had to wander through Europe to a port,
Right.
somehow get on a boat,
Right.
somehow, land in Ellis Island, but they didn't have any special documentation. I mean, I think they probably had a birth certificate, but they were in,
Right.
they were processed through.
And I wanna
Again,
let-
this isn't our story, but...
But
it's
I think I want to let these guys jump in.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up is because as you hear some of the rhetoric
Yeah.
about we only want people in this country who love America, or we hear rhetoric about bad hombres, or what I think we find with the immigrant experience is that people come here because for hope, with good feelings. They're not coming to America to do harm to anybody. They're leaving difficult situations and coming to a more hopeful situation. So that's just an observation.
Let's pick Eric up. He's in the desert.
Yeah, right.
Back to the desert.
Yeah.
What's going on? How do you get out?
We walk in, and the thing is that first time that we tried crossing the border, we were actually caught. And it's pretty much like very militarized when it happens, right? It's get on the ground, they search you, they put you in the back of a truck or a van, and they drive you to a holding facility, a detention center. Basically, it looks like a jail. It is a jail. They just have a different name for it. And so I'm there, 7 again, right? And I think it's really important.
Are you crying your
Me,
eyes
right?
out? I'm trying to imagine this. Are you panicked, or what's going on?
I am just shocked, but I have my mom and my brother, and they're helping ground me. And so I'm 7 with my mom and my brother, and we're behind bars, right? Like, I'm literally behind bars, not knowing what's going on. So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress going through my mind. I don't know what's happening. I'm crying for a bit. We were there for several hours until we were processed and then driven back over to the Mexico side of the border and just kind of dropped off in the middle of the street. And that was the first attempt, which failed.
Take it from there. Then what?
Then the second time we tried again, but the second time it was me and my brother by ourselves, and then my mom and my cousin went a separate way. And that second time was successful. We got to the other side, and then there was me and my brother waiting for my mom and my cousin to show up. Right?
And where were you? At a safe house?
Yeah.
Okay.
We ended up at a safe house it was just full of men, right? And me and my brother we were scared, of course, right? We were the only people under 15, 20 in that house. And then eventually we got moved to a safe house with children and women. And I'm just kind of, throughout the whole time, wondering where my mom is, right? Hoping that she'd make it back. Because there's a lot of instances where this happens and then the children make it past, but then the parents never do. And then it's a whole different story. But luckily for me, on Thanksgiving, actually, my first Thanksgiving in the U.S. was when I saw my mom. She finally came, and we were all together, and then we continued our journey. Got on a bus, went to Vegas for some reason. No idea why we ended up there. And then from there we went to Connecticut, and I saw my dad after 3 or 4 years. And then I think that's an immigration story, but it doesn't end there, right? Because I was still low income, an English language learner, undocumented, and having to go through the school system and do kind of everything else and live life, but in a very different way.
Renato, I want to switch focus to you. A slightly different experience with your family background, but overstaying a visa, you still had transition issues, I'm sure. I just don't know what they are.
Right, absolutely. And my mother was, like I said, in a place where she was a little bit better situated to start a new life, and she actually got married soon after we came here with our visa, and in that way we were able to get our permanent residency. That's one of the very few pathways to residency or to citizenship that exists right now for immigrants. But many people come here with families. Many people come here too young to marry, or not in a situation where they can figure out a way to do that. And it's a system that sort of incentivizes this institution that not everybody is in a position to enter into, which is that marriage. And so I grew up very, very well aware of how lucky I was, because I didn't necessarily earn my green card, right? Like, we all have this narrative of the people who did it the right way, right? But I grew up with many undocumented peers, and I frankly didn't feel any better than any of them, right? Like, they weren't here to do any more harm than I was. There was no merit-based way that I got my green card, and they didn't. So it just seemed unfair.
I want to shift focus a little bit. You guys are connected with Connecticut Students for a Dream. If you just walk us through what that organization is and what you do for them.
Yeah.
Renato, maybe
Yeah.
take it from there.
Yeah, so I actually work directly for the Connecticut Immigrant Rights Alliance, which is a coalition of many groups, and one of those groups is Connecticut Students for a Dream. So as an organizer, I focus on trying to bring leaders together from many different organizations in the community, or nonprofits, or grassroots groups, to come together and advocate and kind of use our collective power.
Now, these Latino communities or the broader community? When you say community leaders, I wasn't...
Yeah, absolutely. In all of our communities, right? Our local communities, our community of Connecticut, we have people who aren't necessarily Latino. There are many immigrants who aren't Latino, but we also work with many folks who are just leaders of nonprofits who just believe in doing the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, walk us through how you would do, what you're trying to accomplish by getting them together.
Yeah, so we advocate for legislature. We advocate against deportations. We turn folks out to rallies during times when it makes sense, and we bring folks out to lobby when it makes sense. We bring people together to do community education when that's what makes sense. And in that sense, actually, I think Connecticut Students for a Dream is one of our most active groups and one of our most focused and hardworking organizations.
So specifically, how do students, part of the organization named Connecticut Students for a Dream, so just weave in the students and the dream part of your mission.
Yeah, so I mean, the name comes from the DREAM Act, which was a national legislation that in 2010 was the last time it came up and did not pass. That was meant to give college students that were undocumented a pathway to citizenship. But the bill did not pass, but many of the students who organized around that time still used the idea of who they had been identified as dreamers. So they came together to advocate for issues at a statewide level and local levels. And that's where that name comes from. And the idea of student organizing is just on our college campuses or in high schools, because undocumented students face many challenges that documented students or students who are citizens don't face. So that need kind of helped to bring people together and sort of come to work for their needs.
So, Eric, does that mean you testify in front of the legislature, you lobby legislators?
Yeah,
How do you do it?
It means a lot, right? It means I do lobby legislators. It means I do speak in front of the legislators at public hearings. But it also means that I meet one-on-one with other undocumented students in the community, right? In colleges, in high schools, just in the community that may not be in school, right? It also means that I organize rallies and protests. You know, it also means that I testify in front of the University Senate at UConn, right? It's really a lot of different things that Connecticut Students for a Dream does. And a lot of it is based on advocacy for undocumented students, but we don't stop there, right? We do advocate for the larger undocumented community, whether they be Latino or Black, right? Because we know we do have Black undocumented immigrants in a lot of our large cities.
So what can you do for an individual? I mean, you say you meet with some people that are individuals that are undocumented. What can you possibly do?
So, you know, we try talking to them. We try finding out more about them, right? Because I think a lot of this is very personal. Doing this work is very personal, right? Because it really affects us in every aspect, right? Like we said, on a local, on a statewide, and on a national level. All of these things affect how we live our day-to-day lives, right? So it is getting more information on how they're living, what are their fears, what are their concerns, what do they want to change, what do they think is most important. And then engaging them in ways that are meaningful for them, but also giving them the skills and empowering them to be able to make their own change in their communities on a statewide level and on a national level, right?
Can you be specific as to an example or two?
So last week we actually had our Connecticut Students for a Dream had their week of action in Hartford at the Legislative Office Building. And there, we trained undocumented students on how to lobby their legislators, right? We had a teach-in in the atrium, right? We walked in, we had a teach-in, we taught them how to lobby their legislators, how to talk to them about our bills, right? SB 17 and HB 7000. And then after that, we broke out into groups, and we went out and we lobbied our legislators, right? We talked to them about our bills, we got their feelings, and some of us even got co-sponsors, right? So that's things that we do, right? We empower them, but we also give them the skills to be able to carry out that work on their own.
You know, we started the show with Mike reading about a change in approach by the federal government and the whole notion that people might face deportation under different circumstances. And I'm just curious, can you give me an idea of what it was like to live life undocumented prior to that, I guess prior to President Trump, and then what is it like now? And in terms of just day-to-day life, I mean...
Yeah. It's hard sometimes, right? There's a difference between my story and a lot of other students' stories, because I always knew I was undocumented, right? You don't forget walking through the desert and being caught and then walking through and then going through the whole process again, right? There are some folks who come here at age 2 and don't remember any of it and never know that they're undocumented. But for me, right, it was always this present fear of, like, in the first 3 years that I was in this country, of like, okay, we can't go outside. We can't go walk around. We can't just go to the park. We can't just enjoy life. Because we got caught at the border that one time, right? Because every January, February, June, July, there are raids in communities of color and in immigrant communities looking for undocumented immigrants, right? It is this big fear that you never know when it's going to be your time, that they're going to be coming for you. And it's not even, it's like at home, but it's also at work, right? It's also like, is Immigration Customs Enforcement going to stop where my dad is working and pick up folks? Are they going to stop where my mom is working and pick up folks, right? Are they going to pick me up right after school, right? Because there have been cases of that. And so that was it growing up, right? It was like knowing that this was a danger and knowing to always be looking over your shoulder and being aware of what's happening at all times. And now in the Trump administration, right, like it's gotten worse, right? It's gotten way worse. All these new executive orders, and specifically executive orders that expand the notion of who is a priority and who should be deported, are really scaring and frightening our community, if we're being honest, right? But it's also activating some other members of our community. Some members now are like, okay, this is serious, like this is it, like now I can do something, now I want to do something. And now they turn to us and they say, what do we do? And then, you know, we have abilities and we have skills that we then say, here, these are some things that we know how to do, but also, what do you want to do, right? We prepare folks, and knowing their rights, if ICE comes to your door, right? We prepare them for what did they come to your job. But it is really a different environment. It is much, much worse. And we have to face the reality of that, but we also have to acknowledge that it is much worse, right? Not minimalizing that it's just another executive order, it's just another day. Yes, it is another day, but my community is more at risk, not more than ever.
Renato, I know you have a Wallingford connection. Your organization has a Wallingford connection. There's meetings here. If you could pick up from where Eric left off, people may come to these meetings looking for help, advice, specifics. How do you guide them specifically? What do you tell them on their rights, on being prepared, on what to do?
Well, actually, do you mind if Eric doesn't know your
Yep.
rights?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've actually, here in Wallingford, we've had Know Your Rights workshops. Right, like we've had a Know Your Right workshop at SCOW, where we had members from the community come out, and we're like, okay, if ICE comes to your house, this is what you do, this is what you not do, right?
What do they do?
If ICE comes to your door and knocks at your door, you are not to open the door, right? One of the very important things is that we tell our community is not to do immigration's job for them, right? Don't tell them you're undocumented. Don't tell them you weren't born in this country, because you also don't have to, right? It is your constitutional right, your 4th and 5th Amendment rights, that you do not have to answer any of their questions except for your name, and they don't have a right to enter into your house unless they have a warrant signed by a judge or a magistrate. So those are very important things, right? And those apply not only to the house, but to a traffic stop at your work, in the street, and all these different situations. But that's kind of the basics of the rights that people have, is their Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, and to know that they have these rights, and to know that they can exercise them.
Ralph?
How do you, either one of you, one of the things I'm curious about is and we've heard there's an uptick in this, which is how do you advise, say, two parents who come to you and they're in the country, they're undocumented, but their children were born here. So I imagine what they're facing is the possibility, on top of everything else, the possibility that they could be deported and somehow be separated from their children. So I'm just, do you see cases like that, and what do you advise people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I mean, deportation and our sort of immigration crime or enforcement sort of process has many ugly parts, and I think the separation of families is one of the ugliest, right? I think that when we talk to parents who have these kind of panics, we try our best to try to make sure that they feel that they can remain as calm as possible, that they get organized, that they become a part of these community networks and these kind of community defense sort of organizations where we kind of talk about what are your rights, and we talk about what type of workshops can we put for you to make a plan in case the worst thing happens, for you to, like, who's going to take care of your children? Have you talked to a lawyer? Do you already have an attorney ready? Do you have members of your community who would create a petition for you to try to help you stay in the country, or to turn out to a rally perhaps to show support for you?
Are there lawyers that you have on call, like a list that are sympathetic, willing to come on a moment's notice?
Yeah, we certainly have many lawyers who we've worked with from here in Connecticut that have really gone above and beyond and have done work, even beyond what their pay scale is, to just for the sake of making sure that they're taking care of people.
What can they do? Are there any defenses? If someone is detained?
So yeah, like if somebody is detained, they have to go through a deportation proceeding, right? I mean, you mentioned one way which they could be expedited, but they still have the right to an attorney, and they still have a right for representation. So it's very important that they have an accessible lawyer ready to reach out to.
So can you walk us through what that proceeding is like? Is it in a courthouse in Hartford, in Bridgeport, in New Haven?
Yeah.
What happens?
So first, right, two recommendations we do make to parents, right, and we had a workshop about this yesterday actually, is that they have a power of attorney form and they fill it out for an attorney, right, so they have the ability to kind of do a lot of the legal stuff, but also a guardianship form, right, so that they know who their child is going to stay with in case of a deportation, or in case they're being held for a deportation hearing, right? So those are two really important suggestions that we make to parents, right? And it's also to create a plan for what happens if a deportation is to happen to one or both of the parents. But once they are in the system, right, there are court hearings. Court hearings happen in Hartford, and I don't remember the address, but there's a building in Hartford, right? They have court hearings there, and people are sometimes deported directly from there. Other times they're transferred to other immigration facilities, which we don't have one here in Connecticut. So they are transferred either to Pennsylvania, to Massachusetts, and sometimes even as far as New Orleans, right? And then after that, folks can visit, right? Like the family of the person who's in deportation proceedings, they can visit the person. But it's always very difficult because the immigration system does not make it easy for the relatives or friends or people to visit that person or to provide that legal aid. They always make things much harder than they need to be. So yeah.
I want to digress for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
There is a case that is in front of the U.S. Supreme Court as we talk. A decision could be any day, and it has to do with a right to bond or to be released on bond if you're undocumented. I didn't read the circuit court case. I just know generally that this is supposed to be a very significant opinion. I think the court is split, with some justices saying there's absolutely a right to a hearing and to be released on bond, but I don't know the facts and circumstances. But just a heads up to our viewers and the readers of the Record Journal, watch for this case. And with the hearings today of Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch, who knows where he stands? I don't know if he was asked anything about that. He wasn't answering questions anyway, really, of any substance. But it's going to be major development. So I turn to you guys again. Is the issue of bond something that comes up in your lectures and your presentations? Or is that just not something that happens in Connecticut?
There's a lot of instances where it does happen and people can get bond and do that stuff.
Yeah.
But usually families don't have the money to be able to do that. Right? There are processes, I think, in the community right now to set up bond funds for immigrant communities and for immigrant families. But more often than not, they are denied a lot of things that are their inherent rights as people who are here in the U.S.
Ralph, the issue of sanctuary cities, pretty controversial. And especially on social media, you hear the back and forth, and the temperatures rise, and people are screaming at each other about the issue of sanctuary cities. In Connecticut, maybe the situation is not as extreme in other parts of the country, but the Record Journal has paid some attention to this issue. So maybe this is a good point just to read some of those articles to review what we even mean by sanctuary cities, and then we'll get the guys back involved. So this is an article from the Record Journal, January 28, goes all the way back to January 28, and it talks about what the position of Meriden and Wallingford is with respect to that concept of sanctuary cities. So it starts out with Meriden, the new city manager. It says that the perception that Meriden is a sanctuary city is false. While the immigration status of arrestees in Meriden and surrounding towns is not reported to federal authorities unless the crime is violent in nature, there is no official sanctuary designation in place. Meriden Mayor Kevin Scarpati said he's been asked by councilors and residents to designate the city a sanctuary. Thus far, there has been no action or even a proposal, according to him. The article turns to Wallingford, and who wrote this? Jesse Buchanan. He interviewed Deputy Police Chief Mark Mikulski, and Chief Mikulski said an arrestee's fingerprints are sent to the state as part of a uniform arrest report, along with other information, including nationality, place of birth, and alien registration number, if applicable. It's not up to local police to enforce immigration laws, Mikulski said, and the town department won't detain someone for being in the country illegally. Mikulski said the department notifies ICE if someone they suspect of being in the country illegally commits a serious offense. Wallingford police deal with undocumented citizens every day, he added, but reporting them to ICE is very infrequent. Sanctuary cities, do you have a position, your organizations have a position, and is Wallingford's position and Meriden's position inadequate? Would you like to see a designation, sanctuary city?
So I myself, I am very pro sanctuary city. I live in Wyndham, and we worked hard to pass a resolution. And I know that the definition of what a sanctuary city is kind of loosely defined, but more or less what we're looking for is a commitment to not use our town's resources to help the federal government in the terrorizing of our own community. Right? We do not believe that if somebody is stopped for possession of marijuana, that it should mean that they get separated from their family. We believe that if somebody serves punishment adequate to their crime, just like any citizen, it is not up to our police officers or our municipal officials to share their information with the federal government.
Well, the designation sanctuary city is sort of a flashpoint. It's in a way, it's a controversial term, and I guess my question more specifically is, isn't Wallingford's position okay? They have a quote from the police chief, Meriden, same thing, that says, we're not cooperating with ICE. Come get them if you want. But, isn't Wallingford okay? You had a thought, I thought.
Well, yeah, because I think I just want, and I want to let our guests also chime in here, but
Yeah.
I think that Well, first of all, Meriden and Wallingford both have sizable Latino populations.
Yep.
And have for
Long time.
a long time.
Yep.
So we're all used to living side by side with Latinos. They're in the schools where we go and do business. I mean, you can't go around Meriden and Wallingford and not have and mix with Latinos. So I think it's important to understand that. Because if you, like me, who live in Wallingford and work in Meriden, people are generally very comfortable with each other. That's my observation. I want to hear what the gentlemen have to say. Meriden seems to be wanting to, in this case, avoid the sanctuary city designation because some people have a knee-jerk response to that. But I think what Meriden and Wallingford have said, as you summed up, is they're not going to use their resources to help the federal government deport anybody except a violent criminal. So I think we're kind of getting into semantics here a little bit.
Well, that's what I want to know. Is it symbolic? Is being a sanctuary city symbolic and not practical, that the position of Wallingford and Meriden is good enough? It's not as symbolic as you'd like it to be, not as aggressive as you'd like it to be, but practically speaking, a sanctuary city would deal with ICE, with the feds. Sanctuary city would deal with the feds just like Wallingford and Meriden is. Is that true or not true? What are your views on that?
Yeah, so I'm for sanctuary policies, right, first of all.
Sure.
And so sanctuary policy, cities, campuses, is more of a category of policies that protect immigrant communities, right? And so while I do applaud their efforts for coming out and saying, yes, we support our community, right, I tend to prefer policies that are written down for police departments and also for cities, because we know policies and protocols are more enforceable than a statement that's made in a newspaper, right? Because on top of that, right, it's not just symbolic, because in certain sanctuary cities, right, there are policies that protect immigrants once they've been arrested, right? There are things called ICE detainers, right, that if somebody is arrested, ICE issues a detainer, and they say, hey, can you hold this person for an extra day while we come get them? A lot of sanctuary city policies say you should not honor those ICE detainers, because those ICE detainers are also unconstitutional, holding a person past the time they should be released for no reason other than they're undocumented. So it's more than just symbolic, right? We need more than just symbolism in this fight for the rights of immigrants. So while I applaud their efforts, I hope and I wish that in the future there are policies that can be enforced and that do protect the community on different levels.
Ralph?
Well, just to show the nuance of this, I think one of the reasons Meriden and Wallingford officials may be hesitant to declare themselves sanctuaries is because they're worried about attracting attention to what's really going on, which is they really are trying to help undocumented in their community, but if they come out and give a sanctuary label, they may incite some members of the community. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense to me. I think Meriden is closer to being a sanctuary city, or almost closer, I guess, because there's more pressure on Meriden officials to do that. However, there's a segment of Meriden, the Manny Santos
Right,
crowd.
That's right what I'm saying, exactly.
The Manny Santos crowd
Right.
would go ballistic.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
If the Meriden City Council and
Passed
the
a
mayor
resolution.
passed some
Excuse me,
sort
right.
of resolution.
Right.
So it would come up in the elections, it would be very
Right.
divisive, and you'd see protest and counter-protest, and the peace and quiet in Meriden, as
Right.
we know it, might be gone.
Right.
Wallingford may be in the same boat. It's very divisive. There is a segment in Wallingford which does not like the sanctuary city concept. There's a,
Right.
Most of our viewers probably
Right.
don't. Wallingford, by a slim majority, voted for Donald Trump. That's what the Meriden voters did. Wallingford voters did. Wallingford voted for Donald Trump.
Yes, and I
So
just want to point out what...
assume,
Right.
rationally, I draw an inference from that vote, an inference that they're not sympathetic at all to the sanctuary city concept. Your thoughts?
And I want to let these two get back
Yeah.
on, but since we're talking about Wallingford here,
Yeah.
You're right, but I thought it was also important or revealing that Steve Knight, who's been a guest on this show,
Sure.
a Republican town councilor, and someone who I think would admit to mostly conservative views. And people might think he's a Donald Trump supporter. I don't know if he is or not. But he had a column in the Record Journal recently, because he's active with the Spanish community of Wallingford, where he gave just a wonderful defense of undocumented people in Wallingford, what they're going through right now, and a plea, a very, even in words, came through as an emotional plea.
It's a very compassionate
to
statement,
stop,
absolutely.
To
Yeah.
just stop terrorizing people. So that gets into the nuances of our communities, and we want to let these two back in.
Yeah.
And-
Your
yeah,
thoughts?
and I think sometimes I don't even care for a sanctuary city policy, right? I just want to make sure that our community is protected, right? So you don't have to call Meriden and Wallingford a sanctuary city, but the question is, are there policies that protect the undocumented immigrant community, right? And that's
Right.
really at the root of all of this. That's all I care about. I know that's a lot of what organizations care about. Sometimes we care less about the label than the actual policies that protect our communities, right? Because that's really what's important. It's not what it's called, but it's what it is.
Donald Trump's budget outline, it wasn't really a budget, but it came out this past week, allegedly, I haven't read it myself, allegedly called for cuts in federal funds to those cities and towns that were officially or de facto sanctuary cities. That's an example of a target on the backs of potentially, Meriden or Wyndham or something like that, New Haven, if they, if this budget results in real policy. So there could be some mayors and states that would take the position, we don't want to get into that battle. We're going to be sanctuary-esque in everything but label and not have our funds cut. Actually, the amount of funds, I don't think is that much, based on what I read. Money is tight these days, but what I read, it's something, but it's not the worst thing in the world. We've had an issue across the country of ICE agents posing as local police. Have you guys come across this?
Yeah, we most recently heard about this in the case in Hartford.
What's going on? What do you hear, and what do you think about it?
Well, we heard that there were police waiting to detain somebody. That there was ICE agents prepared to detain somebody while wearing police uniforms or jackets that said police. We believe that those tactics are deceptive. We know that the mayor of Hartford, where this happened, came out against those type of tactics, and we know that that's kind of been a tradition with that office. It's kind of been it is a form of terrorization, where they come into communities and try to find ways to sort of trick people and separate families and take people and treat them like dangerous criminals when really not.
It has been said, and at the end of my comment, I'm going to ask you, is this true or not true? That's where I'm going with this. It has been said by some that if local police assist the federal government in deportation policies, that the undocumented community will be more reluctant to ask for help, report crimes, be witnesses, assist in prosecutions, and so it's the argument of state and local governments, some state and local governments, that we're not going to jeopardize the local police mission for the sake of a federal immigration policy or lack of a policy. How true is that argument, or is it more hype than truth?
It's very true. It's very true.
Explain.
It's because knowing that reporting a crime could get you deported is going to deter you from reporting a crime, right? It's going to deter you from interacting with police. It's going to deter you from going to the police station and reporting that something was robbed from your house, that your house was broken into, that you were assaulted, that you were raped, that anything happened to you. It's going to deter that from happening. We know that policies that protect undocumented communities and limit the power of police to not act as ICE agents actually make communities safer, right? We know all of these policies make communities safer because they reinforce that trust between the immigrant community and the police department to create a better cohesion that allows for better reporting, clear lines of communication and a lot more transparency than policies like 287G, which deputize police agents as ICE agents. And we know in those communities are terrorized to even talk to police because of the power that they hold.
So how would you respond? How do you respond to your critics that say sanctuary cities are trying to nullify federal law? I've seen that on social network. That's what they're nullifying federal law. That's how they feel. That the documented community went through proper procedures, waited for years in some cases to get their proper documentation, and the advocacy groups that, such as you are a part of, are unfairly trying to shortcut the process and give current undocuments an unfair advantage over those who went through the process. You've heard the rap. You've heard it. What's your answer to that?
I mean, we're not trying to nullify anything, right? We're trying to make sure that people do the jobs that they were designed to do. ICE can do their job, and police can do their job. We're trying to make sure that they don't work together so that state and local governments don't waste their money doing the federal government's job for them. Right? We want to also make sure that communities have a trust with the police so that crimes can get reported, so that there is clear and transparent lines of communication there. We want to make sure that that happens, right? We're not trying to nullify anything, right? There's a department already in place set to handle deportation and deportation proceedings. They can do their job, right? And police can do their jobs. But doing it together only creates chaos and mistrust in the community. And if somebody would like to point me to a place where I can get my citizenship, I'd be glad to go there and get it. Because there is no pathway to citizenship for a vast majority of immigrants in this country, right? There is no pathway to citizenship. Unless I have $2 million and can get an investor's visa, then there is no pathway to citizenship.
So we're going to get you a pathway. I'm going to turn to Ralph, and he's my expert on solutions when there are no apparent solutions, but Ralph is my expert. So Ralph, you've had all week to think about this. You knew the show was coming up.
Right.
We had thought about it, prepared for it. What's the solution to the dilemma that we're trying to describe on this show tonight?
Wow. You want me to come up with
I
a
do
solution?
want you to consider. Someone's got to come up with something. I'm
Right.
starting with you. You're the editor of
Okay.
a prominent
Yeah.
paper, Pulitzer Prize candidate, I understand.
Yeah. No. But, I don't know the...
I love it when he
the
squirms.
bureaucratic- Well, that's okay.
It makes my week.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I don't know the bureaucratic remedy to this.
Yeah.
But as far as your question about... Or the people that think... I waited in line, why aren't other people waiting in line? And I think the thing you have to, at least I try to consider with that, and maybe this gets to the solution, which is part of that group that you're saying didn't wait in line were children that were brought here and by their parents. And I don't know, how do you, now you have someone who was brought here as a child who's a young adult, and you're going to deport them because they're undocumented? Well, they were 3 when they came here with their parents. So I don't know how you're saying that group didn't get in line. And then the other thing that Eric's story kind of brings up is, well, what about people that came here on work visas? They came here because someone wanted to hire them to do a job. And at some point, I imagine that visa ran out, but still, they came here because they were offered a job. So those 2 groups right away, I think you have to, I don't think you can say, why didn't you get in line to those groups? So
Well, the question's being asked.
Right. So I don't know. In some ways, maybe I'm willing to, what would the word be, that you grant somebody citizenship that can show they were brought here as a young child, or they show that they came here on work visas. So maybe clemency isn't the right word.
We know the thought.
The thought.
Yeah,
Okay, good. All right, good. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I have a thought that's
Go
going
ahead.
to make
You have a
absolutely
better one.
nobody happy.
Good.
I'm gonna lay it out, and then we'll go to Eric and Renato, get
Yeah.
their reaction, and our time will just be about up.
Right.
So this is going to make nobody happy. There's a doctrine in the law. It's a technical word called lashes, and what it means is unreasonable delay. if you sit on your rights for too long, you lose those rights. If there's an unreasonable delay in doing something and other people sort of let their guard down because you haven't enforced your rights, you lose those rights. And here's how I'm applying that in this case. The federal government has had a problem for years and years and years and years. I think Ronald Reagan tried immigration reform. It didn't really work out. Since then, the immigrant crisis, the undocumented crisis, has done nothing but grow in numbers. Yet Congress, under multi-administrations, have failed to take the bull by the horns and hire enough immigration judges, or have enough facilities, or have some sort of measure deliberative. They just haven't done it. They've sort of looked the other way, and now they're saying, "Oh my goodness, look the situation, we're going to deport everybody in sight." So I'm saying, take that doctrine of lashes. The federal government has waited too long to try to go back 10, 20
Right.
years
I like
and
your
30
idea.
years
I like your
and
idea.
enforce this. The federal government is sort of stuck with the delay it created. I don't know what the time limit is, whether it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. I'm willing to compromise, and we can sort of
Right.
sort that out. But after a while, you go back in time. You're going to say those who came here those who came here undocumented or stayed undocumented, they've been here for 8 years or 7 years or 10 years. Anything before that, there has to be a pathway to citizenship that's reasonable, not punitive, realistic, and you got to solve it that way. And that's not going to make anybody really happy.
So-
but I think that's
Right, and I
That's
think you've
where
got
I
a good idea, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. So then
Yeah.
if you came here when you were 5 years old,
Yeah.
you went through school.
and let's say you've been here for 15 years.
Right, you went through all of school, you
No
went
one
through
got you.
college.
No one sent you back. No
right.
one enforced it.
Right, good.
Too late.
Okay, I
Too
just
late.
want to make sure.
The federal government did not take the bull by the horns to solve it. Fellas, I'm open to criticism, but what do you think? What's your solution?
I think the human rights approach, it can't fall any short of creating a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented people living here. I think that, some of us did come as children and we didn't really have much say in the matter, but even our parents made a very brave decision, and they did it with our best interest in mind. And I think that it's very important to acknowledge that people don't come here just because they feel like it, right? And I think that our borders, you might not say we had open borders for a long time, but we didn't have things like quotas as far as how many people could come from certain countries, right? We did have relatively an open amount of immigrants that we were accepting for a long time. And I think that the system that was put in place to kind of reverse that and create these quotas is based on certain prejudices as far as what populations of immigrants were coming in. So I think those are some of the root issues that we need to address when we're looking at a comprehensive immigration reform.
Eric?
I think it's very important to think about this beyond, I think, immigration, right? Because citizenship isn't the end-all, be-all to everybody's problems. We need to be able to attack this so that folks have the rights that they deserve. We need to be able to make folks have the ability to work legally in this country, right, so that they can then be able to legally provide for their family. We need to be able to provide health care for folks who do not have health care because they're undocumented, right? Even though I'm undocumented, even if I have the money, I still can't buy off the open market to get health care, right? We need to fix a lot of kind of flaws and holes in the system that allow for the rights of immigrants and undocumented immigrants to be taken advantage of, right? We need to make sure that we don't just aim for citizenship, but we aim for dignity and for the humanity of folks who are living in this country without a citizenship status, right? And we need to make sure that it is accessible for everybody, because we know that there are other communities in this country who have citizenship, who still and have for a long time faced arduous challenges to employment, housing, and education. So we need to be able to attack all of those problems, not just give citizenship, because it's not going to be the end-all, be-all to solve every problem that undocumented immigrants have, right? Because even if I do get citizenship, I'm still going to be low income. I'm still going to be a first-generation college student. And I'm still going to be somebody who had to learn English and wasn't learned English as a first language. So there are a lot of other problems that we need to be able to tackle to give dignity and humanity to a lot of people in this country.
Let's make that the final word.
Okay.
Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
I would really like for us to talk about the state legislature.
I'm
if
sorry.
possible.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We've got a few minutes.
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
that.
Great.
Yeah.
So as we've mentioned in a couple of our comments, we are advocating for HB 7000, House Bill 7000, and Senate Bill 17, both of which are labeled the Afford to Dream Bill, which would allow undocumented students access to institutional aid, which is just student-generated financial aid. So that's saying if an undocumented student goes to one of our public colleges, they're paying tuition. That means part of what they're paying goes into a pool of money that is supposed to be distributed based on need.
Say at UConn or something.
At UConn, at our community colleges above all else, and at our state, our CSUs.
Yeah.
So what we're looking to do is just to create an application for undocumented students to be considered to show need, right, for these offices of financial aid. Because as it stands right now, undocumented students cannot fill out the FAFSA, and that's the only way that these offices of financial aid determine need. So in order to kind of create that application, we are trying to pass this Afford to Dream bill, and we would like to ask folks to reach out to their legislators and ask to support. I know that State Senator Len Fasano is one who we are hoping will do the right thing and take the right stance on this bill.
You were somewhat equivocal on that. Has he supported it?
So if I'm not mistaken, he supported 2 years ago when there was a part of it that had DACA attached to it, which was a work permit that only a few students can qualify for, and it's also attached to an executive order which can be repealed by the president at any time, which now that the president has changed, I'm sure you could see why we wouldn't want to attach a state law to that. But as of right now, we would like to know for sure where he stands on this, and we hope that he will take the right
So
stance.
are you meeting with resistance to this idea as you lobby, as you talk with the legislators in Hartford?
We have some resistance, yeah. A lot of folks, it mostly seems like, are not understanding, or they feel that their constituents wouldn't understand that this isn't state money. This bill has a zero fiscal note, so it would not cost our state anything. People have misconceptions about the immigration system, and that affects where they stand on this.
If you know, where does Mary Mashinsky stand? Where does Craig Fishbein stand, if you know? They're the local legislators from Wallingford.
Mushinsky is a Democrat, right, correct?
Yes.
Then she is one who we know that is on board. Yes, I'm not sure about the second one, I'm sorry.
And is there a practical deadline, a legislative deadline, where all bills have to be voted on or something? Or is there
Well-
a hearing coming up or something like that?
So the bills recently got out of committee. Both got out of the Higher Education Committee
That's
this
a good
past
sign,
Wednesday.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. And the session ends in June this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And we are asking folks to, as soon as possible, reach out to their legislators, especially Senator Fasano, because we believe that he has it in him if he hears from his constituents to do the right
And
thing.
he's in a leadership position.
Yes.
Yeah, final thoughts on that?
No, it's just that I'm impressed. It's a good example of how you have to work through the system
Yeah.
to get things done, even from for an undocumented community. But you have to work through the system.
Let's make that the final word. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you again for coming in. We appreciate it. Our viewers learned a lot. I learned a lot. Puts a new light and new insight into the issue. Thank you, viewers, for tuning into the Citizen Mike Show. We normally produce on Wednesdays. You got to see the Citizen Mike Show Thursdays at 9 o'clock. That's when it's fresh. It's fresh raw meat at Thursdays at 9 o'clock. If that doesn't work for you, Fridays at 9. By then, probably on the weekend, it's on YouTube or on the WPAA website. There's a video on demand button, WPAA.tv. Find it, click on it, watch the show, and after that, it's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays at 9 at night. Hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.